Hi, I'm Yakov Horowitz, and welcome to our live. Our topic is understanding and addressing suicidal ideation. It's certainly a somber topic, and an important one that we need as much information as we can. There's a lot of a swirl of information and misinformation about this subject. And it's extremely important that as parents, educators, community members, that we have the very best information we can so that we can respond to children or adults who are suffering from suicidal ideation. My dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Yisroel is really an expert in the field, and I found him to be an incredibly sensitive, thoughtful, well-researched therapist. We've been discussing subjects personally for so many years now. I'm going to invite him in and to providing information as best as we can. You know, some of the questions that came in while I'm waiting for Yisroel to join us, perhaps the most common question that came in while, in the couple of days in the run up to this live was, what happens when kids say things like that? And we don't know if they're serious or not. I mean, that's one common question that's understandable. Here we go. Yisroel?
Yeah, I'm trying to get it on my desktop. So hold on a second.
It's fine. You're fine. You're fine the way you are.
Okay.
I see you.
Okay, great.
I see you perfectly and hear you perfectly.
Okay, so let me shut down what I have open. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining, and really talking about such an important topic. It is not something that we hear enough about in terms of issues that are related to mental health as they relate to our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors, adults. So whatever information you could share with us would be very helpful. I was just mentioning as you were about to come on that the number one question of the questions that I got was, what happens when you hear kids saying something like in a joking way or saying, I feel like killing myself, or something like that. How do we respond? Start from the beginning, please. Explain when we talk about suicidal ideation, what exactly does that mean? And of course, the other questions will just flow from there, please.
Okay, so we're talking about the idea that a person wants to end their own life and the fascination with it. Just because a person is considering it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be going ahead with their idea. It's just a fascination. So the first thing a person should do when they hear these things is try to gauge how serious the person is. What I mean by seriousness doesn't mean their feelings towards it. A person could really be down in the dumps and wanting an escape. But a person wanting an escape doesn't mean that their escape that they're thinking about is ending their life. So the first rule for anybody, a therapist, a non-mental health professional, is to try to gauge three things. One is the seriousness. Person says they wish they were dead. Are you serious? Well, not really. Okay, ask them, are you serious? Second question is, once you know that they are serious, ask them if they have a plan. Because if the person has a plan to end their life, then that indicates a higher level of seriousness. Number three, once they say they do have a plan, ask them what their plan is and see if their plan is lethal in an immediate sense. So for example, they say, well, I'm going to smoke marijuana until my lungs give out. Okay, so you have a little bit of time until that happens. Number two, see if they have access to their plan. They say, I'm going to drive a car off the highway. Okay, do you have access to a car? No. So it's a fair. So that's the first thing. If they meet all of those criteria, then right away a person should reach out to Hatzalah ambulance and try to get immediate help for this person. If it's not the case, then you have time. And what I mean by you have time is a person doesn't want to be hospitalized. That's really a last resort and an immediate intervention, immediate and emergency intervention. So you have time to sit down and to talk with them, allow them to express their feelings, and to try to connect them with a mental health professional if they are ready for that. Not everybody is ready for that, but at least in the meantime, be there for them. Just some statistics to start with. Nearly 50% of parents whose children had suicidal thoughts didn't know about it.
Wow.
Kids do not share these with their parents.
Actually, it's not surprising. I'm saying it's not surprising that's something they wouldn't want to share because the parent's going to be upset about it or other things like that. Yeah.
Right.
Keep going. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Number two, 80% of people who commit suicide say something prior. They will say, it's just so hard for me. I want to die. I've given up caring. It could be blatant. It could be a bit more vague. So just be wary of them and ask. And this is the number one rule when it comes to suicide. You're not going to get somebody to commit suicide. Sorry, I shouldn't say commit suicide. It's a gray area now because committing implies an infraction. Right. You're not going to get somebody to act on their suicidal thoughts by asking them if they're suicidal. Right. You're not. Most people who are choosing to go that route is because they feel that there's no other route for them. Right. And they are yearning for an alternative.
Right. And I saw a Congressman, Jamie Raskin, very sadly lost a son to suicide. And I saw he was talking, he spoke so eloquently and so beautifully and painfully about it. And he said that his daughter told him that her brother must have been, that he knew how much it would hurt the rest of the family. And they had such a loving, great relationship. Imagine how much pain he was in that he took that step despite knowing that it would harm the family, that he must have been suffering so terribly. I think maybe another step or a first step to this would be to understand depression or to understand, what it's like for people to suffer sadness and despair or pain to such a degree that they would, God forbid, harm themselves. So, like, absolutely. How do the Rambam describes it as Morosh Chayra. It's such a, from over 800 years ago. It's like that everything looks dark. That the world looks dark to them. I think it's such a painful, correct expression about how people feel. So, what signs should people look for that people are despondent or even before suicidal ideation? Because very often, I've been in touch with many parents, God forbid, after their children took their lives. I did an extensive live with Avrem Gerari. Who was just, it was so painful to listen. And he obviously had such a great relationship with his daughter. So how would we notice, how would people notice if somebody is despondent to that degree?
Don't be afraid to ask. First of all, 9 out of 10, I'm looking at the statistic in front of me, studies show that 9 out of 10 teens who died by suicide were struggling with mental health conditions.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, sure.
Right.
So how would parents notice mental health conditions? That's what I'm saying. Are there children? Some kids are very verbal, and they'll just come out and say it. I feel helpless. I've heard it from kids. In that kids I've worked with. In that terminology. Of course, you immediately get them help. But what does it sound like when they're not that verbal? What are the signs to look for?
So you see slipping of grades, a change of behavior, not connecting as much, self-isolation. Now, we're talking about teenagers. We're talking about developing bodies and developing minds. There are going to be changes. but you look for excess and things that are slightly outside the norm when it comes to things like that.
Okay. And is it best for a parent, a loved one, a sibling to just directly go and talk about it and say, I see you seem to be, I see your grades are slipping, I see, other things going on that you mentioned. So should they just say, is there anything you'd like to share with me, or how are you doing, like something like that? Would that be something?
So start gently, open up the lines of communication, move towards the direct questions. Don't be vague. Don't ask things like, "Are you really stuck in darkness?" Because that's a vague statement. Say, are you considering ending your life? It's a very hard thing for a parent to say, and a parent should try to sit and practice that beforehand, because there's going to be hard words to get out of your mouth.
Right.
So don't be vague. Practice beforehand. Ask. Is this something that we need to be concerned about? Are you considering suicide? Take their feelings seriously. The amount of times people are dismissive, it's heartbreaking.
Right.
These are their feelings, and whether you agree with them or not, it's their feelings and it's their reality. Let them know that you're glad they told you, and do that with your tone of voice, and do that with your body language. Kids, Hakol kol Yakov v'yadayim yedei Esav. The voice and the hand motions and the body language need to be in sync.
That's very good.
And this might be a shock for you.
That's
So,
nice. Go ahead. And what if the child says, I can handle this. I am thinking of ending my life, but I got this. I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm not really gonna do it. Like, does that wipe it, or should the parents? I would imagine that in any situation, if the child is not yet getting, mental health help in terms of therapy, or if they're not doing so, I imagine certainly they should make arrangements as soon as possible for them to see someone. Is that correct?
Correct, because in that situation, the child is telling you that they're hurting, that they need help, but it's not to the extreme yet.
Right. One thing I've noticed in the frum world, and of course every situation is a heartbreak, and there's any limit, there's just no words. But I've certainly noticed, just anecdotally myself, over the past 10, 15 years, increasingly so, God forbid, when people take their lives, like, parents are much more likely to talk about it openly. And I think it's so helpful, because 30 years ago when I started working in this space, God forbid, if someone took their life, you would hear that it was an aneurysm. And I'm not making a value judgment. God forbid if parents don't want to share that with the public, that's nobody's business, but the families, if they choose to share that. I'm not implying, God forbid, that if a child takes their life and the parent presents it as something else, that's something wrong, God forbid. But I think it's healthy overall, on a communal level, not on an individual level, but communally. I think it's very helpful that people are starting to talk about at Shiva, or talking to friends in the community, posting online, that our child was in terrible pain and took their own life. I think it's helpful to let us know that it's real, and that if children are acting a certain way, we really need to pay attention.
Absolutely. And part of it is that one of the issues when we call everything an aneurysm, right, is that a person feels alone with these thoughts. I'm not healthy because I'm thinking this. This is not normal. A kid shouldn't think this way. A Jewish frum kid shouldn't think this way. And then you get into a darker hole, because you're already in a dark place. Right. Because you're thinking of ending your own life. And now you're in your own head, and you're saying things like, I want to end my life, but that's not a good thing to think, and I can't talk to anybody. The rabbis will call me a kofar. it'll kill my sister shidduchim.
And then when people say
And
hey, that's the biggest affair in the world for which there's no kapara, like that's
yeah,
going to help them a lot. I'm sorry.
absolutely.
What? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
I've heard people
anything
say
comes.
things like this. I've listened and watched in horror as some people shared this either publicly or individually with someone. Or people told me that, or my Rebbe said, or my parents said that this is the biggest avera in the world, and because the death was an avera, there's no kapara at all. I humbly would suggest that like nobody even go there.
Well, with Chaim Walder, I'll make an exception, but nonetheless.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the things that I heard from Avram Garari, one of the things that I heard from him that was so it was so impactful listening to it, and I've used it in talking in guarding parents. He said that in the either weeks or days before she took her life, Rahman al-Islam, she seemed happier. I don't know if you've come across this in the research or I found it so fascinating. I spoke to other people afterwards who has suffered similar tragedies or worked in the space, and they said that it is not uncommon that that because life is so painful for them, when they make their decision that they're taking their life, I'm going to stop crying.
they're at peace.
It's some way of relief for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
That they have an exit strategy from being in such pain.
Well, think about it. A person wants a light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
And that's why a person says things like this, because they're hoping that you,
Will
whoever
notice.
the you is, can provide them with the light of the tunnel.
Right.
And to continue on with the list that I was giving before to the parents,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Focus on the child, not yourself. The number of times I've heard you would do that to your mother? Oh, it would hurt us so much. Okay, I mean, yeah, that you might think you're showing love, you're showing guilt.
Right.
Guilt is not going to work.
Right.
Don't try to fix things straight away. Sometimes we try to say, oh no, how can we fix things? Sit down and listen to them. That's how you're going to fix it. You're going to start fixing it. Some people feel that they don't have a voice.
Right.
And you're giving them a voice. Empathize how they're feeling. Don't downplay it. Oh, that's really nothing. Other people have it worse. Don't tell them not to worry about whatever is bothering them. Don't downplay it. Try to explore what's making them feel that way. Reassure them that they're not alone, and that there's help, and you're gonna be there with them on this journey. Now, realize with a lot of parents, they don't have that relationship with their child. Either the child doesn't feel comfortable with the parent, or the relationship is strained, or just you're dealing with a teenager.
Right.
So, yeah, sure, whatever, fine, okay. So, in such a situation, here are some of the tools that you're welcome to use. Write them a letter, send them an email, send them a WhatsApp. Use that to your advantage.
A note on the pillow.
Yeah. Create time and space for them. Go for a walk or a jog with them and talk there. Do not start conversations in public. Shabbos tables are a wonderful place, not for this.
Yep.
When you confront somebody in a public situation, the child is going to give you the answer that gets them the least into trouble. Mm-hmm. Also known as the answer that gets you to be quiet quicker. So not in public. If it's not you, connect them with somebody they have a kesher with.
maybe you want to talk to your older brother, or maybe you want to talk to your Rebbe, or talk, if you know that person, I think I put a caveat there to make sure that the person you're sending them to is someone that gets it, that will pay. I'm sorry?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and maybe even give them a call first and say, I'm sending, I suggested, we're not getting, we're very concerned about our son or daughter, but maybe because we're the parents, then they're not comfortable disclosing to us. We hope they will to you. We encourage them to talk to you, but be aware that they're in a bad place right now, and they're feeling dark.
Right. Absolutely. And to rehash an original point you said about, suicide being the worst avera. If anybody ever asks you, whoever you are listening to this, they say, is suicide mutter? Or that sort of a question, or how bad of an avera is suicide? Your answer isn't yes or no. Your answer is, what's bothering you?
Exactly.
Would you like to have a coffee?
Exactly. Right. That question, right? That's totally spot on.
It's the modern version of the can I use milk for the Dalit Kosos?
I was thinking of the same thing. I was mamish thinking of the same thing. We always finish each other's sentences from time to time. This is one of them. It's exactly what I was thinking about. Just for just if you're not familiar with what Yisroel Meir is saying, that the story is told that someone went to a rabbi and asked for the 4 cups of wine that we make at the Pesach Seder. They're called the Arba Kosas. Can I use milk? So the rabbi gave him money for wine and for meat, because obviously if he had meat, he wouldn't be drinking milk together with it, because the Torah prohibits this. So Yisroel Meir is saying that read between the lines. When somebody asks you a question like that, is suicide permitted? The first thing to say is, how you doing? Not respond to the. It's not an up and down question. We could be used, to ask something. It's interesting.
Also,
Go ahead. No, please.
Sometimes people don't have the capability of saying straight out, I'm in pain, I'm thinking of ending my life. They will ask in that roundabout way. That woman in the story was too embarrassed to say, I need money, not only for grape juice,
Right.
but for wine, but for meat. So that level of embarrassment times 10 when it comes to suicidal thoughts, because of the society that we're in.
Right. That's correct. I didn't want to. You were going through the list. I didn't want to jump in then. But what you said about telling children, how could you do this to your parents, or how could you do this to your family, or it's going to hurt your sister shidduchim, or something like that. Meaning not talking about the child, but talking about what impact that will have on everybody else. I was at a Madrigos retreat my wife and I volunteered for 8 years for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to spend time with kids recovering from addiction, and one of the during the meals, kids would get up and talk. So at the last meal of one Rosh Hashanah, I'll never forget it. A young man got up and he started saying how he was talking about his journey, and parenthetically, his parents look like straight arrows, like not out of the box at all. When I saw them earlier, so I was even what were they? They just looked so like very, very in the box, lovely people. But if you had to pick a lineup and say which parent is most likely to get it, I don't think externally you would have picked this one. So this kid got up there and he was talking about his journey, and then he said people would come to me when I was in my worst times, and they would say, how could you do this to your parents? Don't you realize you're killing your parents by doing this, or your grandparents? There's a heart condition. People get desperate. They want children to change their practice, so they just throw things at the wall and hoping one of them will stick. So it was fascinating. The kid said, the 17-year-old, he said, don't you get it? it? He said, I felt like screaming at them. Don't you get it? He said, I tried to kill myself twice. The kid said, I had 2 suicide attempts. I couldn't help myself. How could I help my parents? He just burst. He said, and he turned to them and he said, but you guys never gave up on me. That's what he said. But so, the notion that a human being that's in such pain is capable of considering or mitigate, thinking of how that it's going to impact somebody else. Maybe some can do it, but some certainly cannot. And it's just laying on, like you said, laying on more guilt.
Yeah. Imagine just a cup that's at its maximum and you're trying to put in more pain. It's guilt.
Good point. It's very good. So what's the best what are the best practices for getting kids or adults, long-term help? At what point do parents, I mean, obviously under the guidance of therapists, when should they actually take their kid into the emergency room for an attempt or find a facility?
Well, definitely if there's an attempt, but if those the 3 things that I originally mentioned,
right? That they have a plan and they're serious.
Say they're serious. There's a plan, and you've assessed the plan to be both lethal and accessible.
Right. That was a good example you gave with the car and right. Yeah.
Yeah. The person says they're going to use a gun, but they can't access a gun. So.
Right.
One thing that I'd be remiss for not mentioning here, there's something called suicide cognition, which means that once a person hears about one suicide, it tends to lead to other suicides. Now, parents should be proactive when they hear of a famous suicide or someone close to their child who commits suicide, and don't try to be reactionary.
Right.
Take the step and say, is this something that you've thought about?
They come in clusters very often, God forbid, right? They come in clusters. I was involved in a few situations like that. I'm really glad you brought it up, that hearing that someone else, even if it's a TV personality or someone out in the public or anybody else, for some reason, perhaps it's understandable, like that triggers, what was the word you used? Not ideation.
It's contagious.
Oh yeah, right.
It opens up the door. It's like the reverse of, unfortunately, of Nachshon Minodov jumping into the Yamsuf. He did it, and
the first one.
So
right.
The first
it becomes more right. It becomes something that's in the wheelhouse of what they're thinking about.
Right.
And once that happens, people who are prone to that. I would recommend, if anyone's interested, if you're finding that you're trying to elicit information from the children about this. Let's say you're concerned that a child might have suicidal ideation. If they express something like that and they're not opening up to you, you might want to look up active listening, empathetic listening. Dr. Stephen Covey of the 7 Habits. His habit number 5, I think they're all brilliant, but this is exceptionally wise. Habit number 5 is seek to understand and then to be understood. He says that there's 4 types of listening that don't involve the person who's trying to talk. You're listening to respond to them. You're listening to argue with them about what they said. He gives 4 types. It's an excellent. There's a lot of literature. If you look up online, Habit 5, you'll see all sorts of links to that type of of listening, so that people feel heard. Yisroel may have mentioned it a few times, that people should feel that they're heard. Dr. Pelkowitz, when I started working in this space, I was fortunate to be mentored by some great people. Dr. Pelkowitz once told me, he said, Yanki, when people talk to you about issues, sometimes they want solutions, and sometimes they just want to be heard. And even the ones who want solutions want to be heard. So you don't think that they're coming to you because they think you're going to solve their problem. They want to be heard also. One of the first LGBTQ young men that I spoke to, he told me, and he said, "Look, Rabbi, I know you can't solve my problems, but it's so comforting that I can talk to someone with a rabbi before their name, and know that you're not going to judge me and that you really listen to me." So that's another great piece of advice. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's evening time for you in Eretz Yisrael.
It's fine.
Any
One
final
thing
thoughts or anything?
yeah.
How can people see your content? You've been posting a lot of different content. How can they get in touch with you if they want to seek help or go for counseling? Whether it's
So
parents
my website is ympicker.com or Yisroel Meir, YMPICKER.com
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
or Yisroel Picker, YISROELPICKER is my Instagram handle here.
Okay.
You could reach me that way. One thing that I'd just like to finish off with, that the reminder that just because you realize that that you as the parent or even the friend have assessed that the person who you're speaking with is not suicidal, does not mean that you walk away and say, okay, they're good.
Right.
Right. That means that they're not at a,
Okay.
DEFCON 3.
Right. Exactly.
But they still want your ears. They still want the help. It just means that you're going to attack it differently. But don't think that you will just walk away. Oh, I spoke with it. He says he's struggling, but he's fine, and we don't need to worry. Yeah. How many times do parents actually not worry because their teenagers say, "Don't worry"?
Right. Of course. That's a good line. For all of you, I just want you to know that Yisroel Meir is an excellent resource if you have a child in Israel that's there for the gap year, and you're looking to send them for help. He specializes in education. I know we talk shop a lot, and I deeply respect him. So he does counseling for young men and women who are in Israel for the gap year and have issues that may have been there beforehand, and you're looking to find somebody in Israel who can follow up the therapy, or if maybe they're having issues being away from home, or with all the stress and trauma going on in Israel overall, they might be negatively affected. I really would encourage you to explore the possibility of having Yisroel Meir see your child. Thank you so much for your time, Yisroel Meir. I
My
look
pleasure.
forward
Likewise.
to doing it again with
Pleasure as
you.
always.
Continue your amazing work.
I mean, you
Take
too.
you well. Sei gesund.